The security guard's hand clamped down on Marcus Webb's shoulder hard enough to leave bruises. I said, "Move." The guard hissed, his face inches from Marcus's weathered features. "You're embarrassing the customers." Marcus tried to pull away, but his legs, weakened from sleeping on concrete for 6 months, buckled beneath him. His worn army surplus jacket caught on the guard's watch, tearing at the shoulder seam. The small paper cup he'd been holding clattered across the polished marble floor, scattering the few coins inside. "Please," Marcus said, his voice hoarse from disuse. "I wasn't bothering anyone. I was just, you were panhandling. That's illegal on private property." The guard yanked Marcus toward the exit, his partner moving to block the growing circle of onlookers. "Should have called the cops instead of wasting my time." But across the atrium, past the fountain and the Christmas decorations that mocked Marcus's reality, a woman in an expensive charcoal suit had stopped mid-stride. Her hand rose to her mouth. Her briefcase slipped from her fingers, landing with a crack on the tile. Because she knew that face. She knew it better than almost anyone in the world. 12 hours earlier, Marcus had woken to freezing rain seeping through the cardboard he'd wedged against the loading dock behind Macy's. His back screamed as he sat up, 53 years old, but his body felt 70. The military duffel that held everything he owned in the world was soaked through. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan, came home with medals and shrapnel in his spine and nightmares that medication couldn't quite silence. For 15 years he'd worked construction, pushed through the pain, made a life. Then the opioids his doctor prescribed turned into something darker. The addiction cost him his job, his apartment, his dignity. 6 months clean now, but the streets didn't care about redemption arcs. Marcus dragged himself upright, every movement deliberate against the pain. He had a plan today. The Riverside Mall opened at 10, and he'd heard from other homeless folks that people were generous this time of year. Christmas spirit. He'd keep his head down, stay polite, maybe make enough for a hot meal and a night at the shelter. He walked the 3 miles to the mall, his limp pronounced, his breath visible in the December cold. The clothes he wore, donated from a church charity, didn't quite fit. The jacket was too large, the pants too short. His boots had holes worn through the soles. When he pushed through the mall's gleaming doors, the wall of heat nearly knocked him over. The contrast between the frigid street and the climate-controlled luxury was visceral. Christmas music played from hidden speakers. Children laughed near the Santa display. The smell of cinnamon and expensive coffee filled the air. Marcus found a spot near the fountain, away from the main traffic flow. He pulled a paper cup from his pocket, one he'd saved from a coffee shop dumpster, and placed it carefully in front of him. Then he sat against the marble wall, trying to make himself small, invisible. For an hour, people flowed past. Some dropped change. Others clutched their shopping bags tighter and looked away. A few wrinkled their noses at his appearance, his unwashed smell, the visible evidence of a life lived rough. A young mother paused, her daughter tugging at her sleeve. The girl couldn't have been more than 7, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Mommy, why is that man sitting on the floor?" The mother's face tightened. She pulled her daughter closer. "Don't stare, sweetie. It's not polite." But the girl pulled free and approached Marcus, fishing $1 from her coat pocket. "Here," she said solemnly, placing it in his cup. "I hope you feel better soon." Marcus's throat closed. "Thank you," he managed. "You're very kind." "Emma, come on," the mother called, apologetic but firm. They hurried away. That $1 felt like validation. Like maybe he was still human after all, still visible as something more than a problem to be solved. Then the security guard appeared. He was young, maybe 25, with the build of someone who spent serious time at the gym and the swagger of someone who had never been truly powerless. His name tag read, "Brandon." "You can't be here," Brandon said, looming over Marcus. Marcus looked up, shielding his eyes from the overhead lights. "I'm not causing trouble. Just sitting. You're panhandling. That's against mall policy." Brandon's hand moved to his radio. "You need to leave. Now." "I'll go," Marcus said, reaching for his cup. His hands shook, partly from withdrawal that never fully left, partly from the familiar shame. "Just let me." Brandon kicked the cup. Coins scattered across the marble, rolling in different directions. The dollar bill fluttered toward the fountain. Something in Marcus snapped. 6 months of sleeping in alleys, of being invisible, of swallowing his pride and his pain. He stood, too fast, his spine screaming, and faced Brandon. That was unnecessary, Marcus said quietly. I said I'd leave. Don't talk back to me. Brandon grabbed Marcus's shoulder, his fingers digging in hard. I'm done being nice. You haven't been nice, Marcus said. And maybe it was the exhaustion or the cold or the last shreds of who he used to be, but he didn't move. You've been cruel. That's when Brandon called for backup, and things went bad fast. The second guard arrived quickly, an older man named Stevens who looked uncomfortable but followed Brandon's lead. Together they grabbed Marcus, one on each arm, and began dragging him toward the exit. Stop, Marcus said, trying to find his footing on the slick marble. I can walk. Just let me walk. Should have thought of that before you got mouthy, Brandon hissed. They hauled him past the fountain, past the shocked faces of shoppers who pulled out phones to record or simply stared. Marcus's boots scraped across the floor, his duffel bag trailing behind him, spilling its contents, a spare shirt, a water bottle, a worn photograph he kept of his daughter from before everything fell apart. The photograph slid across the marble and stopped near a pair of expensive heels. Sarah Chun stood frozen, staring down at the image. Even after 18 years, she recognized the little girl in the photo, recognized herself at age 8, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on her father's shoulders at the state fair. Her eyes tracked from the photograph to the man being dragged across the atrium. Her father. The world tilted. Sarah's carefully constructed reality, the one where her father had abandoned her and her mother, where he'd chosen drugs over family, where she'd built her entire life on the foundation of his absence, cracked like thin ice. She'd searched for him. Of course she had. Hired private investigators when she made her first million. But Marcus Webb had fallen through society's cracks so completely that even money couldn't find him. The last confirmed sighting was 4 years ago in a different state. And now he was here, being thrown out like trash. Stop. Her voice cut through the mall's ambient noise like a blade. Brandon and Stevens froze. Sarah Chun was a regular at Riverside Mall, CEO of Chun Tech Solutions, one of the fastest-growing software companies in the Pacific Northwest. Her company had just signed a lease for a flagship store on the mall's second floor. Management knew her face, her name, her importance. She crossed the distance in seconds, her heels clicking with authority. Up close, she could see the details she'd missed from afar. The scar on his temple from the IED blast he'd survived, the way his left hand trembled, the profound exhaustion in eyes that had once been warm and full of life. Let him go, she said. Brandon's grip loosened slightly, confusion crossing his face. Ma'am, this man was panhandling. I said let him go. Sarah's tone could have frozen nitrogen. Now, they released Marcus, who stumbled, catching himself against the fountain's edge. He looked at Sarah with the blank incomprehension of someone who'd grown accustomed to cruelty, not kindness. He didn't recognize her. How could he? The last time he'd seen his daughter, she'd been a child. The woman before him was a stranger, poised, powerful, wearing a suit that cost more than he used to make in a month. Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but this is a security matter, Brandon tried again. This is my father, Sarah said quietly. The words detonated in the silence. Shoppers who'd been filming gasped. The guard stepped back as if burned. Marcus's knees actually buckled, and he would have fallen if Sarah hadn't grabbed his arm. Sarah? His voice broke on her name. No, you can't be. You're not. It's me, Dad. Tears tracked down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. It's me. Marcus shook his head, trying to pull away. You shouldn't. I'm not. You don't want to be seen with me. Don't tell me what I want. Sarah's voice was fierce. She turned to the guards, her expression hardening. Get your manager. Now. And someone get my father a chair and water. Immediately. People scrambled. The mall's assistant manager appeared within minutes, his face pale with panic. Sarah ignored him, focused entirely on Marcus, who'd collapsed onto the bench someone had rushed over. She knelt in front of him, not caring that her $1,000 suit was pressing against the dirty marble floor. How long, she asked. How long have you been on the streets? 6 months. Marcus couldn't look at her. Before that, I was. Sarah, I'm not the man you remember. I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. I know about the addiction. I know you went to rehab twice. I know you tried. Sarah's voice softened. I hired investigators. They lost her trail, but I know what happened. The injury, The pills, the spiral. Dad, I know. Then you know I don't deserve. Stop. She grabbed his hands, feeling the calluses and scars. You're my father. You served our country. You work yourself to the bone to provide for us. You got hurt and fell into something that destroys people every day. That doesn't erase who you were. Who you are. Marcus finally met her eyes, and the resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same stubborn set to the jaw. Your mother died 3 years ago. Cancer. Sarah's voice caught. She never stopped loving you. Made me promise to keep looking. I failed her. I thought you were gone for good. The assistant manager cleared his throat nervously. Miss Chun, if there's anything, there is. Sarah stood, and the shift from grieving daughter to CEO was instantaneous. First, those 2 guards are fired. Effective immediately. Ma'am, I don't have the authority. Then get someone who does. What I just witnessed was cruel, unnecessary, and completely unacceptable. They assaulted a homeless veteran for the crime of existing in your mall. He was panhandling. He was surviving. And your staff responded with violence. Sarah's eyes were cold. I want them gone. I want a formal apology. And I want a written policy change about how this mall treats homeless individuals. You have 24 hours, or Chintech pulls out of our lease agreement. Are we clear? The assistant manager nodded frantically and rushed off. Sarah turned back to Marcus, her expression softening immediately. She sat beside him on the bench, close but not crowding, giving him space to process. I have so many questions, she said quietly. But first, when did you last eat? Marcus tried to remember. Yesterday. Maybe. There's a soup kitchen. Come on. Sarah stood and offered her hand. There's a restaurant upstairs. We're going to have lunch, and then we're going to figure this out. Together. Sarah, I can't. Look at me. Marcus gestured to his filthy clothes, his unwashed appearance. They won't let me in anywhere. They will if you're with me. Her voice was firm, and anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with my lawyers. Slowly, Marcus took her hand and let her help him up. His duffel bag had been retrieved, his scattered belongings carefully collected by a remorseful-looking employee. The photograph of Sarah as a child was pressed into his palm by a woman who had been crying while watching the reunion. They walked through the mall together, Sarah in her power suit and Marcus in his donated racks. People stared, but Sarah didn't flinch. She kept one hand on her father's arm, steadying him when his limp grew worse, slowing her pace to match his. The restaurant hostess took one look at them and began to speak, but Sarah cut her off. Table for 2. Somewhere quiet, please. Something in Sarah's tone made the hostess reconsider whatever she'd been about to say. Of course. Right this way. They sat in a booth near the back. Marcus couldn't stop staring at his daughter, at the woman she'd become. You're successful, he said, wonder in his voice. I heard the guard say something about a tech company. Shin Tech Solutions. We develop accessibility software for people with disabilities. Sarah smiled slightly. Started it 8 years ago in my apartment. Now we have 200 employees and contracts with half the Fortune 500. That's incredible. Marcus's eyes shone with pride and grief. Your mother would be so proud. I'm so proud. She was proud. Wore herself out bragging about me. Sarah's voice caught. But she missed you every single day, Dad. We both did. The server arrived, clearly uncomfortable with Marcus's appearance, but too professional to comment. Sarah ordered enough food for 3 people, sandwiches, soup, salads, coffee. When it arrived, Marcus stared at the spread. I can't afford, Dad. Stop. Sarah reached across the table and grabbed his hand. Please, let me do this. Let me take care of you for once. Marcus broke. 18 years of pain, of shame, of surviving on the streets finally crashed through his defenses. He wept silently, his shoulders shaking, and Sarah moved to sit beside him in the booth, wrapping her arms around him the way he'd once held her during thunderstorms when she was small. I'm sorry, he gasped. I'm so sorry I left. I tried to get clean, tried to come back, but I was so ashamed. The things I did for drugs, the person I became, I couldn't let you see that. Couldn't let you remember me like that. So you disappeared instead and let us think you were dead? Sarah's voice wasn't angry, just sad. Dad, we needed you. Not perfect. Not clean. Just you. We could have helped. I was too proud. Too broken. Marcus pulled back, wiping his eyes with a paper napkin. By the time I finally got sober, so much time had passed. I figured you'd moved on. Built a life. Why drag you back into my mess? Because you're my father. Because I spent 18 years with a hole in my heart where you used to be. Sarah's own tears fell freely. Because I needed to know you were okay, even if you couldn't be part of my life. I needed to know you were alive. They talked for 3 hours. Marcus ate slowly, his stomach unaccustomed to real food. Sarah learned about the shelters he'd stayed in, the odd jobs he'd tried to hold, the constant battle with pain and the temptation to use again. He learned about her company, about the awards she'd won, about the mother he'd lost and the funeral he'd missed. Finally, Sarah pulled out her phone. I'm calling my assistant. We're getting you into a hotel tonight, a good one, with a real bed. Tomorrow, we're finding you a doctor to address that back pain with proper treatment, not pills. And we're getting you into housing. Sarah, I can't let you. You can, and you will. Her tone left no room for argument. I'm not asking you to move in with me or pretend the past didn't happen. I'm not pretending we can just pick up where we left off. But you're my father, and I have the resources to help you get back on your feet. Let me do this, please. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, saw the strength she'd inherited from him and her mother, the determination that had built a company from nothing. Saw also the vulnerability, the daughter who'd never stopped hoping. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. Sarah made the calls. Her assistant arranged a suite at the Marriott downtown. A doctor friend agreed to see Marcus the next morning. Sarah's own therapist, who specialized in family reunification, had an opening later that week. As they left the restaurant, the mall's general manager intersected them. Both guards had been terminated. A formal apology was drafted. The policy change was already being implemented. The mall would now partner with local homeless services to provide resources rather than just removal. Marcus watched Sarah negotiate these changes with the same fierce protectiveness she'd shown him, and something in his chest, something that had been frozen for years, finally thawed. Outside, Sarah's driver waited with her car. She helped Marcus into the back seat, then slid in beside him. There's going to be a lot to work through, Sarah said as they pulled away from the mall. Therapy, rebuilding trust, learning who we are now, not who we were 18 years ago. I know, Marcus said. I'm not expecting miracles. Good, because this is going to be hard work. Sarah looked at him, and her expression was fierce and tender at once. But we're going to do it together. You're not alone anymore, Dad. You're not invisible. You're seen, and you matter, and you're worth saving. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. As the car merged into traffic, taking them toward a future neither could have imagined that morning, Sarah rested her head on her father's shoulder. And Marcus, who'd spent 6 months sleeping in alleys, who'd been dragged across a mall floor like garbage, who'd lost everything and everyone he loved, finally allowed himself to believe in second chances. The road ahead would be difficult. Recovery was never linear, and healing took time. But for the first time in 18 years, Marcus Webb wasn't facing it alone. And that made all the difference.